Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Something Terrible Happens Sometimes, a film screening and discussion on confronting and addressing personal childhood trauma through art and animation. My name is Leah Sweet. I'm the head of education and programs here at the Gray Art Museum. The Gray acknowledges with respect that NYU is located on the ancestral homelands of the Lenape people. We recognize the continued significance of these lands for Lenape nations past and present. The Gray is currently closed to the public due to the installation of our upcoming exhibition, Anonymous Was a Woman, which highlights 25 years of women's achievements in contemporary art by celebrating the landmark Anonymous Was a Woman artist grant for mid-career women artists living and working in the United States. The show opens on April 1st in our galleries just next door at 18 Cooper Square, and will be up until mid-July. And though the Gray is closed, larger themes of this evening's program resonate with works in the museum's collection, due in part to a major gift from longtime art patrons, social activists, and downtown Manhattan residents, Mr. Joseph Lovett and Dr. James Cottrell, both of whom are here tonight. Indeed. Their collection centers artists, many from downtown New York City, who explore and expand conventional definitions of gender, sexuality, disability, and more. Artworks donated from the Cottrell Lovett collection will be on view when the Gray reopens to the public on April 1st, so be sure to come by. We're open Tuesdays through Saturdays. A couple of thank yous to our speakers, of course, and to our co-sponsors, NYU Student Animation League, the Department of Art and Art Professions, NYU Steinhardt, and NYU Silver School of Social Work. So this evening we'll showcase 3 short films: The Dog Tied to the Shed by Clove, No Last Name by Josey, and Something Terrible Happened to Joey, directed by Joseph Lovett. And so I'm going to Well, after the screening, we're going to have a moderated discussion with the 3 filmmakers, as well as Dr. Christina Grosso and Dr. Michelle Munson. I'll introduce the 3 filmmakers now in the order of their films and the other discussants after the screening. So Clove is an animator, artist, and stage manager. They are a recent graduate of NYU with a BFA in film and TV with a concentration in animation, along with a minor in studio art. They have a background in fine arts and painting, and are interested in the innovation of visual storytelling, as well as incorporating unconventional forms of media into the traditional 2D animation pipeline. Most of their individual work involves personal memory and the diaspora of first-generation Asian American immigrants. Josey is an animator and freelance graphic designer. He recently graduated from New York University's Tisch School of the Arts in May 2024 with a BFA in film and television and a concentration in experimental animation. He has over 7 years of graphic design experience and was NYU Student Animation League's graphic designer from 2023 to 2024, so some of his animated works demonstrate typographical elements. He typically works with mixed media styles and collage. Joseph Lovett is a veteran documentary film and television producer, writer, and director who has worked with multiple major networks and produced the first television investigations on AIDS for ABC's 2020. As an independent producer and director, he created various feature documentaries and over 35 hours of primetime specials. He has received the Peabody Award, the AIDS Leadership Award, as well as numerous other awards from advocacy organizations, including an Emmy nomination. His nonprofit, A Closer Look, creates and distributes new trauma-informed films, as well as his previous documentaries, for educational purposes. These films have been utilized in medical schools, community groups, religious organizations, public broadcast, and more. So now we're going to switch over to our films. Yep. All right, so will all of our panelists please come to the front? Thank you so much to our filmmakers for such a wonderful presentation.
Good evening, everyone. As we were getting settled, I just wanted to reflect that we just witnessed some very powerful, beautiful work, but also one that may have left us feeling maybe overwhelmed, perhaps if we have our own trauma experiences, a bit triggered. So I welcome everyone to take a nice deep inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. And take a moment to ground yourself. Do a little wiggles, whatever makes you feel a bit more comfortable as we begin our time together.
Thank you. So I'm going to now introduce our moderator this evening. Peace McAllister is an NYU Cinema Studies graduate from the class of 2021 with minors in film and television and business of media. Since graduating, he has traveled on set with HBO and worked with 20th Century and Disney. Peace is the managing director of A Closer Look and an outreach coordinator on all projects. And then also to introduce our two panelists, our additional panelists. Dr. Christina Grosso is a faculty member at New York University in the Graduate Art Therapy Department. Her research focuses on the relationship between creativity and resilience and the role of creativity in neuroscience fostering the field of neuroarts. She is a practicing artist, focusing on abstract expressionism and process-based response art. She has contributed significantly to the field through publications on trauma, art therapy, self-care, and trauma-focused CBT. Dr. Grosso is the founder and clinical director of Mind Plus Body Equals One, an integrated mental health practice. She received a master's in art therapy from NYU and her PhD at Saybrook University in mind-body medicine. Dr. Michelle Munson is a professor at NYU's Silver School of Social Work. Her professional interests are in mental health services research and intervention development and testing, and her work centers on adolescents and young adults. She earned her PhD at Washington University in St. Louis and her MSW at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. Dr. Munson directs the Youth and Young Adult Mental Health Group at NYU. She has published in several professional journals, including Psychiatric Services and Social Science and Medicine, among others. Her research has been supported through funding mechanisms at the state, federal, state, and local levels. So now I'm going to hand it over to Peace McAllister.
Thank you very much. I think everybody can hear me. We're very excited to be back here with the Gray Art Museum. A Closer Look has a very good relationship with the Gray and with NYU. We had done an event in 2021 on James Baldwin. Yeah, it's on. It's a lav. Here, I'll move it up closer. We're very excited to be back. We did a very successful event with the Gray in 2021 on James Baldwin race media analysis, which is on our website if anybody wants to find that. But we're excited for today's topic and to be back. So I'm going to start with our filmmakers. I'd love to go through each one and just have a little bit of time to talk about the filmmaking process as a whole. And Josey, we can start with you.
Yeah, so hello. Okay. Yeah, my name is Josey. I did No Last Name. It was the second film in the lineup. It was drawn with crayons, one page at a time. Thank you. What was the question again? Sorry, please.
Just a little bit about the filmmaking process.
Yeah, so there were many working parts, I will say, for lack of a better term. So it was initially conceived like any other 2D animation project where it went through the storyboard process, then the rough animation was done digitally through Toon Boom, and then from there it departs into more traditional handcraft style. So once the rough animation was locked, essentially I printed out every single page and then had a team of other NYU peers, either in my class or in other animation classes, who I paid very well with my love and support. And then whatever I could do to help compensate them, I would pay for their supplies. Yes, I decided to invest in a more expensive type of crayon, wax pastels called Carandosh. So that was what I used my grant production from NYU for. Once each page was colored, then we had to scan every single page. Scanning was very tricky, just because crayons don't have a very definitive, I guess, line to it. So there was a lot of work in post to kind of like stitch everything together. The backgrounds were done separately, and all the character animation was done in a second pass. So for one shot, we would sometimes have to color the exact same shot 4 times to get background, character, or like water effects, or like other secondary characters. So it was a lot of coloring and scanning. Um, Even though I'm speaking as the director and animator, I can't speak enough to the crew who you saw in the credits, who put a lot. I asked and they delivered, so I'm very grateful for them. And yeah, so for post and sound, it was definitely more. I want it to be more interpretive, especially from the composer. His name's Checo. We met in freshman year of college also. A lot of that was like through, just because there wouldn't be any dialogue in this short piece. So a lot of the emotional through lines would have to be conveyed through audio, if that makes sense. So yeah, and then I am standing before you. So yeah.
Thank you, Josey. Clove, if you'd like to go ahead.
Liz from Hello. All right, here I go. Didn't think I'd be this nervous. So I guess, like my other fellow filmmakers, my piece was a very personal project for myself and for my family. And so the first thing that I thought to start out with was, talking with my grandparents, aunts, and uncles about their experience, their memory of the event that happened that shaped their lives. And yeah, it was a lot of heartfelt discussion. Actually, one of them even insisted that they have no recollection of it ever happening, which is interesting. So I needed that kind of, I suppose, their memory of it to kind of do the story justice. And then while I was working on the film, I believe some of my family members actually had the opportunity to go back to Hong Kong and China and see where it happened in the first place. And I wasn't allowed to go because of school, but they were very gracious enough to give me pictures, many, many pictures. So a lot of my film takes inspiration from those. And then from then, I believe it was just a matter of translating that kind of powerful story into an image or multiple images, I suppose, that were powerful enough to do it justice and, make that story come alive. And it is a horrific story. It's an ugly one that you don't really want to stare at for too long. I certainly don't want to, but it does address things that need to be addressed. I mean, I grew up very privileged in a nice white neighborhood, right? Suburban utopia. And the idea of starvation and famine, that notion isn't even a possibility that crosses the mind in that kind of community. And so having this kind of ugly history and having that all reduced down to a banal stereotype from people who cannot comprehend its severity it's definitely not great. So I guess in creating this film, I think it was a very healing process for myself and for my family, I suppose, because um, I guess creating this story or creating the film and then seeing people react to it, start to understand that history, I think really does justice to, I guess, the history of that, and for anyone else who had to experience something similar to that, it's just very healing for me. So I do want to thank everyone here for coming out tonight, and I guess being here to witness the ugly truths that usually comes with the territory of trauma. So yeah, thank you for being here and witnessing it for the, yeah, to understand.
Thank you, Clove.
I feel like I rambled a bit.
It's okay. It's okay.
Sorry.
You did great.
This too.
Joe's got his mic over there.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here. And thank you so much, Leah. And it's a privilege to be with two young, talented filmmakers who are so willing and so gutsy. It's fantastic. Something terrible happened to Joey is a true story. It's totally autobiographical, except for the balloon and the actual coal. I had written it as I was looking out after I had looked out over the house as it was being built and seeing what it was going to be and experiencing that joy. And I'd written it as a children's story, but couldn't get it. I looked around to different people and they said, listen, you're a nobody in publishing. And so by the time you get an agent, then you have to get a publisher, excuse me, and then an illustrator. And by that time, you'll be dead. So I figured, well, I'm a filmmaker, so I might as well do it as a film, although I'd worked in animation, but I'd never done an animated film before. And I was put in touch with a wonderful animator in London, and who was put me in touch with a wonderful composer in Toronto. And we did the whole thing on Zoom over a year. And it was a fantastic collaboration. Oscar, the animator, worked in oil paint on glass. And so each cell, he would create the cell, and then he would manipulate that painting and then wipe it clean eventually. So he'd get a couple of cells out of that and then go on to recreating it again. So that why it gives that sort of shimmery, tenuous effect, which I think works great for this particular story. And it was a great privilege to work on it. We were very lucky that the New York State Department of Education liked it, and they worked with us on the study guide, and they premiered the film up in Albany at the New York State Museum. And so it's now available on PBS Learning Media, and also is it WITA, their learning media. And we're trying to get it out to more school systems and counselors and therapists that might be able to use it. We think it could be valuable. So that's it.
Thank you very much. I got a little bit out of you, Clove, naturally, but I would love if Josey and Joe, you guys could talk a little bit more about how making the film was helpful for you personally, whether it be overall in your lives or specifically having to do with addressing trauma.
Give me a sec to readjust the mic. Yeah. So I guess like the reason why I tend to gravitate towards like mixed media styles in particular is because like that form of like tactile interaction was what helped me a lot in therapy. I did do a lot of group therapy, anger management, and like cognitive behavioral therapy in high school, but I think the most progress that I made in those years was probably seeing an art therapist. Fortunately for insurance reasons, was discontinued after 3 months. But in those like solid 3 months of work, I felt like I've improved a lot, not in the sense of like just being able to verbalize exactly what I was feeling, but also conveying that in a different. I feel like I often am not able to use words correctly. Even if I do, let's say, memorize entire English lexicon, I will never be able to convey exactly what I experienced, exactly how I felt, exactly what I want to do next. And I think that being able to portray such intenseness, especially intense negative, is how I described it in therapy. I think being able to like, I think the first exercise was just taking fashion magazines and just like, trying to use that in order to like visualize how I see myself and how I saw this other person or these other negative entities. And I think through that exercise, I was just able to convey something to a stranger, although a therapist at that, a better idea of like what exactly, or better yet, like how my mind works. Like even in my film, I'm sure you can see that you could view it or perceive the film as a chronological piece. But I think like even nowadays, like when I look back on those difficult times, like it's really one big messy scrapbook. Um, one big messy scrapbook that's like, a screenshot of this event. And like you'll see in like especially the montage of like the little pictures towards the end. If anything, those are just references of not of the bad experience, but more so of like the setting, the time of where, such a thing happened. And I think like the goal of what I was trying to portray in my short film was not necessarily like the act of what happened, but more so of the effects of what the consequences, essentially. And I think a lot of that, I'm trying to visualize like what happens when you dissociate or what it looks like to try to ground yourself. And I think like those are, common techniques that you're taught in therapy. But I feel like trying to like portray that as a experience is 10 times a lot more difficult, just because like it's a very individual experience. And I'll admit, I'm sure most of you aren't going to. I'm sure you're not going to get the whole story. But that's not what's important. To me, it's like the fact that I lived through it, that I survived, and this is what I have to tell you. Especially as a trans or a former trans youth. I mean, now I'm a trans adult, but that's what it was like living as a trans youth. So yeah.
Thank you, Josey. Joe?
Well, I've had a lot more years to contemplate the trauma, and I didn't want to name the trauma, but what actually happened is that my mother was killed in a freaky car accident where her car killed her, and I was part of the accident. So it was a terribly traumatic kind of thing, and afterwards, I tried to act as if like everything's fine. I mean, I'm just a normal kid. I'm 13 years old, and everything, I'm stop looking at me, and as I've gone through life, I've had a better understanding of what an extraordinary impact that had on my life and how formative it was. And as I've gotten much older, I've come to understand with a lot of therapy. You know, a lot of different therapy, especially EMDR, which I think is the best. I've learned to understand how the defenses I built to get through it and put one foot in front of the other, and what they allowed me to do and what they kept me from doing, and it's been a really interesting journey. And so making the film was a chance to share that, as you wanted to do. I guess whenever I would read about a child losing its mother, and you know, sort of like Walt Disney-ish, Bambi, Dumbo, all of them, but they happen in real life, of course. And every time I would read about that, I'd want to go to that child and say, "You can be okay. You know, life is really hard, and you can be okay." And so this film gave me an opportunity to do that to any number of children, and what I feel very good about the film is that I think it's respectful of the amount of time that it takes and the input that it takes to start to feel whole in a new way.
And Clove, if you have anything else you'd like to add, just really quickly about how the film making process was helpful for you.
I think I might have jumped the gun there. Sorry about that.
It's okay. It's okay.
Um, Nothing I or two other filmmakers haven't said. Just having a witness to trauma is already really helpful and therapeutic. To have someone, I guess, let you know, like, I see you, I see what you've been through, I think is always really nice. So that's all.
Of course. Thank you. I want to go to an open question to both of our clinicians. I just want to ask you both, what did you see in the film or hear from the filmmakers' explanation of their processes that resonate with what you're seeing in your work and or study, you know, with therapy and art therapy and such?
Hello. So I just want to thank all of the filmmakers for their bravery and their storytelling and their innovation, because I think it's in our sharing of our stories that we learn and grow and adapt. I'm taller than the mic, so I have to scrunch down. So I think what resonates for me as a trauma therapist, an art therapist, an artist, is that there's something that art reaches that words can't. When words are not enough, we create art. And each of the processes of the film resonated to me because I think when trauma occurs, I often think about it taking like a 100-piece jigsaw puzzle and like shaking it all up and throwing it up in the air and letting the pieces fall wherever. And then saying, you got 5 minutes, put that puzzle together. You can't do it. Trauma memory is fragmented and confusing and out of order, jumbled, and putting it back together using words. And Josey, you said that so beautifully, that sometimes words pop in, but you can't create the lexicon to tell the story in a full sensory capacity. And I think especially for those of us who experience trauma pre-verbally, you don't have words yet. Your language hasn't developed. You see in pictures, you see sensory, you experience the world through those sensory capacities. So when you're trying to process a trauma memory and you don't have that language, what do you do? And that is where art comes in. And I think one of the beautiful things about animation, I'm not an animator, is that you can take a series of fragmented pieces and put them together and create a moving image that perhaps is telling the story. Perhaps it's a sensory exploration. We saw so many beautiful, bright, vivid colors and metaphor. Art can do that. The bag of coal is a metaphor. The unpacking of that bag of coal piece by piece is about each element of our trauma memory that somehow is coming together and is being able to be processed. So the bridge very often, I think, for all of us, and our filmmakers talked about that subjective experience of how do we process our trauma. It's different for all of us. As a person who's trained in many evidence-based practices for trauma, we know we need safety and stabilization. We need coping skills. We need a phase of remembrance, which is our trauma narrative and our work in remembering and making sense of the things that get distorted. And then reconnection. How do we move forward in our life and make sense and be all of who we are and contribute to the world around us and help others learn from our experience? That shared storytelling is an ancestral privilege that we have learned and we continue to carry on. And I think our storytellers tonight have really brought that piece to life. Just in transitioning over to my colleague, as we think about the power of our voices, how each of us reach that place of meaning is different. So it's about trying different things and working through it. And I love that we have this developmental spectrum of even in Joe's life now, speaking and remembering and telling the story of childhood, we are still making meaning of all those pieces. And that work doesn't stop.
So yeah, just so glad to be here. And I want to just start out also by thanking these amazing filmmakers. And I represent here on the panel the only non-artist. So I'm sort of sitting in the position of somebody who loves and appreciates art. And as a social worker early in my career, actually in the late 90s in Queens, I began to just notice that a lot of the clients that came into my practice and the work that I was doing could sometimes get further in our work together through using different modalities, different creative expression, and certainly seeing these films and being invited to this evening and to view the films and think about them kind of like brought me back to that work. And now I'm a researcher, and part of my motivation in the research that I do really does stem back to some of those early experiences with clients. And in most of the work, I develop and adapt interventions for youth and test them. And most of them utilize some kind of creative expression. So we use music, visual art. And in a recent project, we used photography, still photography. And so, in the work that I do, I feel I am part of offering the opportunity for creative expression to young people who may not have access. As a social worker, I work in communities and organizations where, it's a really powerful opportunity to bring some of these creative expression opportunities to young people. And so that's one thing that really resonated with me in just seeing in the work that I do and documenting it actually through, publication, but also through giving talks throughout the city and, writing grants to try and get more funding to create these kinds of opportunities. I've been able to witness young people picking up a camera and being invited to take that into their community and choose what they want to shoot. and then be part of the process with my team of clinical social workers to invite a one-on-one dialogue in a trauma-informed space to process those images and what they mean and what their voice that they might want to share about those experiences with their peer group. And in some ways, I sort of feel like what I've witnessed in those group sessions, it feels like I'm sort of what I'm witnessing tonight, even in this space that you've created, that the artists are able to, you know, as they have just stated, and you've reflected on so beautifully, bring those pieces of their life into community and share those with each other. And so one of our young people recently, we actually did a video of our Photo Voice project here at NYU with NYU TV. And, you know, seeing these films reminded me of this young person who she was interviewed and said many things about the process. But one of the things that really stayed with me is she wanted us to know, I'm not an artist, I'm not a photographer, but this program, you brought it to my organization, and I said, why not? Why not, you know, take this photograph and go into community? And our prompt was asking them to take photos of the places that, the safe places in their life. And she came back and in this interview said, you know, this program moved mountains in me, and mountains that I didn't even know were inside of me and needed to be moved. And so, right, I think the process of, for me, viewing your films and then also hearing individuals be able to speak about that, how the creative process has been part of moving them into a different place. So that's part of what I wanted to you know, use my reflections to that question, is more about being an observer and a researcher and program person who wants to bring these opportunities into communities, because I have witnessed how they can, you know, help youth, mental health, well-being, all those things. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. I think it's so powerful, especially at the end there. Something that was coming up in my mind as you were speaking was a little bit about art for art's sake and the difference
Yes.
between. You can't hear me? Can anybody else hear me? No? Okay. I'll speak up a little bit. I'll move the lav. I'll just hold it like a regular mic. But I was saying something that came up that I was thinking about as you were speaking and that you spoke on at the end there that I think is interesting is just the fact of, I think there being a block for a lot of people, especially a lot of us who are here who are privileged to go to a school for the arts, the separation between arts as this like high-end, high-class thing that only the select few of highly talented people who will be paid for it at some point are able to access and use as a form of expression, versus it being brought to, you know, everybody and anybody, because everybody has a way and a form of expressing their emotions and making art available and making art conscious, which is something that we want to do at a closer look, let everybody know that, hey, artistic expression is something that's available to everybody and can be used for positive, you know, sources of outreach and expression. So I just thought that was really interesting. I want to move on to another question that's open to both clinicians. You both spoke on it a little bit, but I'm curious how the creative process differs in achieving like self-realization, self-awareness, when compared to traditional forms of therapy. And obviously we talked a little bit about, you know, putting things together piece by piece, being able to express things that aren't always expressed via lexicon. But I'm curious in what other ways, such as, and what other forms of expression that art allows versus regular traditional therapy.
So I think creativity is inherent in all of us. Some of the areas of my research look specifically at different modalities of creativity that enhance our resilience. So there is a very high correlation, very strong correlation between creativity and resilience. So the more we can embed creativity in any way, shape, or form is important. And I think In terms of creativity, I think that we are so lucky to be in a time and space where we have access to so many different forms of therapeutic intervention. We've spoken about art therapy, verbal therapy, dance therapy, music therapy, somatic-based therapies. There's so many different types of approaches to enhance our mind-body connection. I'm an integrative provider, which very simply means I use the modality that works for that person. So I do feel that we need to be open to what the feeling is, what the experience is, because different times, different places, you're going to need a different modality to express yourself. So I think art making and traditional therapy, I'm probably a really bad person to ask that because I see it all kind of mixed and very relevant. What I can speak to is the vast majority of research in trauma has been on verbal therapies, what we call evidence-based practice, which has been tested and validated. I myself am a huge fan of trauma-focused CBT. And what we know is that we see recovery happen. Post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma can be healed. We don't forget, but we can move forward. And I think it's when we can come together and bring more research, especially into the arts, which tend to actually be very underfunded when we're not in a museum, when we are in communities, art therapy, as was mentioned by our lovely filmmakers, does not get covered by insurance. We've been really battling that. So when we are funded, research happens, services are available. So I think that we have so many opportunities to bring integration together and into community practice, which is where we make change. It's very often researched in institutions that have a lot of means, but the practice and the meaning and the accessibility is in our communities where people need the work. So I feel like that's our next step, is bridging that gap, which is still pretty profound.
Yeah. Just to add a couple of things, similar thoughts as my colleague. But I just think it's important also to start by saying, right, that both traditional talk therapy and, creative arts therapy are both so powerful. And in fact, I think they can be really powerful when they're paired, right? And so when you're engaged in talk therapy, utilizing and bringing in some of these different kinds of modality to move the work forward, to create together with your clinician, can be very powerful. And then I think the only other thing I would add is that I think sometimes in our group at NYU, our lab, we talk a lot about especially with young people, but I think with people at all developmental stages, there's something very powerful about utilizing the creative and expressive arts to, let's say, for example, begin to get at something very painful and very raw indirectly, right? And so being able to maybe create for some time, but invite a process where the client or the people in your group or whatever process you're using can begin to respond to a question or create something that might over time be what they need to actually get to the talking. And so I think over time and through working with a number, of young people, I think, and, particularly the young people that I've worked with in social work, there's a kind of what we term survivalist self-reliance among a lot of young people where it takes time to get that connection and to actually begin to sort of talk directly about difficult, painful situations. And so I think that way, sometimes these creative expressive modalities are particularly powerful. You know, as we've seen here tonight, amazing tools to begin, you know, those conversations. And also in our group, we use a lot of music. We bring, you know, music lyric sheets that have increasingly, they have mental health content. So how can we talk about somebody else's lyrics or poetry to invite something in an indirect way that maybe later could be addressed in more of a talking kind of treatment. So that's all I would add. Yeah. Yeah.
The key is access to the subconscious.
Yeah.
I was just going to piggyback on what Michelle mentioned, is that there's that power of metaphor when we are not able to quite confront that trauma memory. There's a lot of avoidance in trauma. It's scary, it's confusing, we don't want to go there. I kind of think about like walking into a cold pool or a cold lake and you dip your toe in, you're like, oh, that's cold, and you jump out. But you keep your toe in there a little bit longer, you habituate, you're used to it, and then you're able to go a little deeper, and then you're going a little deeper. And I'm thinking about our students and the process of year plus of time and hours and hours and hours and hours of doing this work and drawing the pictures and creating the story, that is exposure. You know, we're in it, we're acclimating to it, we're making sense of it. And I think when we can go deeper and deeper and deeper, we do access these other parts of self. You know, similarly, we are seeing more hypnotherapy coming into the trauma world. We're also seeing the use of ketamine and other psychedelics that help us to achieve other levels of consciousness. And it is these layers where different memory is stored. And therefore, accessing those layers doesn't happen. It's not a light switch. You don't turn it on and off. You have to gradually get there. And so where we make those connections and create safety and that shared experience and that shared storytelling, and really creating those relationships also help to facilitate that.
That was one other theme I really, you know, saw across these pieces, was the powerful, significant relationships, right? Depictions of family that were really difficult, and also everything between that difficult to healing and holding, right? And so across these pieces, the social connection, whether it's friends like Ricky, you know, or these evolving, you know, family circles and family systems, you know, that we all live in and we have to navigate, right? So yeah, social support is huge.
I'm just curious for the filmmakers, if there's anything that you've heard from Dr. Munson or Dr. Grosso tonight that has made you re-evaluate or re-explore either your own film or just your thought processes about some of these things. I'm going to start with Joe because I saw a very visceral reaction to the mountains moved comment, moving mountains when you don't know that there are mountains to be moved.
Say it again.
The question or what I just mentioned. The question is, how have anything that's been said tonight made you reevaluate either your own film or how you've approached some of these issues? And I called you out specifically because I saw your visceral reaction to the mountains moved comment, moving mountains when you don't necessarily know that there are mountains there to be moved.
I know. I thought that was a great comment. And no, I'm eager to hear other people's comments.
Okay, we want to go to Clove. Is anything? Yes.
Can we go to Josey first? I have a thought, but I don't know how to say it yet.
Okay.
Lexicons.
I can't remember if it was Christina who said it, but more so like the idea of exposure therapy. Wait, was it you that said it? Or in the sense of like, yes, animating as in drawing every single frame and also coordinating a crew, which during the coloring process, I think half the time I was directing it remotely because I had just finished hysterectomy surgery. So that was like also a feat because it's like, how do I explain what I have in my head, but to other individuals who like, one, don't have that live experience, but also like two, like I'm doing this all like asynchronously as well. So it definitely gave me a lot of time in terms of thinking about how to use words, or I guess like the idea of like verbalizing an image that I have in my head. And I think nowadays, I'm definitely in a much better place where it's like, it's a lot, obviously I can talk to you folks about it pretty, I don't want to say nonchalantly, but a lot easier than like having this exact same conversation, but 8 years ago. Just because like as someone who identifies, from like female to male trans person, like in my immediate community, that was like, I was the first, trans person they ever met. So oftentimes, while I was looking for affirmation, a lot of people, I was met with a lot more questions than affirmation. And in that process, I kind of encountered more doubts about myself, more doubts about my sense of reality, doubts of like, am I even perceiving life? Am I even alive anymore? What is cognizance? If what you're telling me how I'm feeling right now is incorrect or misperceived or too dramatic. Um, so I think like nowadays, well, I think more so like when I began college was probably when I was getting a better sense, at least like linguistically conveying the trials and tribulations of like living as a young trans queer person. Definitely like finding community is a good first step. Um, Unfortunately, with my biological family, that's still a work in progress. But that doesn't mean you can't, find your own chosen family. I know it's like really, I think it's really hard, especially as a minor living with people who should be your role models in life, to have them tell you that what you strongly believe in is all of a sudden like their worst nightmare. um Makes you rethink like what, if a role model says that to you, it's like it definitely causes like a knee-jerk reaction in terms of like, now I'm stuck in the cyclical cycle of like shame and guilt, shame that I even mentioned it in the first place, and also guilt that like I caused like this parent of mine to like go through so much turmoil over something that ultimately, shouldn't they feel happy that I'm more closer to myself than I actually am? Um, and I think like now that um, it's taken me almost a decade now to like think about it. I will say I think time does heal some wounds, and I think it's definitely helped me bridge those gap between some family members, even my parents, and like some friends growing up. Um, Unfortunately, yes, it took time. And like, if I could go back in time to my 15-year-old self when I first came out, I don't want to say it gets easier because it doesn't. But if you just wait a little longer, to say like, as long as there's tomorrow, I can try again. And I think part of me is like, oh, it's such a corny, like banal platitude. Like if my 16-year-old or my 15-year-old self heard that from my future self, I would probably give myself the flying bird. But I guess that gives you a snapshot of who I was as a 15-year-old. But I think instead of looking back towards the past and like a sense of fight or flight, a fear of like who I was, especially pre-transition, I think more so I found a place of empathy and also a place of, you know, gratitude that I did hang on just a little bit longer. So, yeah.
Very well said.
Oh, thank you, Clove.
Oh, good. That was really cool what you said. Sorry, a lot of that just like resonated with me. But I did want to touch upon two things that you two were mentioning. You said something about the animation process of drawing an image over and over and over again in that process. And I wanted to bridge it with your comment about the moving mountains that you don't know are there. So my piece was a little over a 2-year commitment. And you saw the credits, it was pretty bare. So it's safe to say that a lot of nights, you know, hunched over my drawing tablet, I hated it. I hated the process. I was like, this sucks. My back hurts. You know, and even sometimes I wouldn't even understand the importance of sharing that story because it's something you grow up with, right? Like I grew up on the playground with everyone coming to be like, oh, like, haha, Chinese people eat dogs. It's something you get used to and you get desensitized to. And so in my head, at least before I started working on this film, I was just like, this is another truth that you live with, you know. Stereotypes exist. It's not fun, but it's nothing to cry and jab my finger at anyone to, right? But then as I was working on this film, drawing these images over and over and over, and as you've seen, some of it is bloody and some of it's really, really like, yikes, you don't want to look at it. It's scary. You know, it kind of made a reaction in myself like, wait a minute, actually, I didn't like, that sucks. It sucks. And I guess I got to recognize the kind of trickle down trauma that happened to my family and then to me in kind of relation. So yeah, bridging those two together, yeah, creating art is good to, I guess, kind of come to peace with yourself and your story, I suppose.
You know, that's really great. And I think what you're talking about is the process of self-discovery and the fact that it is painful and it is, or it can be painstaking and can require enormous patience. And you do it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And sometimes you make some headway. And, but it all helps to fill in the picture. And I think it's a great analogy. Keith, you want to get other people's comments from the audience? Ready?
I was gonna get maybe one final thought from the clinicians before we
Okay,
move on
great.
to Q&A. If there's anything that either Dr. Munson or Dr. Grosso would like to say.
I would just say, you know, speaking the unspeakable is such an important process of our self insight, our awareness, and our resiliency building. You know, sometimes we think if we have a trauma-free, stress-free life, like that makes you strong. But it's the challenges, the adversities, the traumas that pinball ourselves in different directions that actually creates the trajectory of resilience. And so the idea is to keep doing the work and encouraging our communities to keep doing the work. When there's unprocessed trauma, no one heals. It's difficult and uncomfortable to look back and to do the work and to process. But just like Joey's bag of coal, you can unpack it and you can be lighter and you can move forward. We can't erase the trauma, but we can understand it, we can process it, and we can let go of the stuff like the distortions, the shame, blame, and guilt that kind of keep us anchored in a stuck place. And that's the work and that's the inspiration. And the creation of these films is unbelievable to me, that not only did you have a process of your own personal autobiographical narrative and healing, but you shared this with the world, and we all get to learn and grow and bring it forward. So thank you.
I'm just, we're going to pass a mic around for the Q&A. So if anybody wants to.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, please raise your hand for either the filmmakers or the clinicians.
End the night early and head straight to the reception.
Hello. Hi, I'm Bridget. I'm also an NYU student and I attend animation classes, or I did before they graduated. They're adults now. They left me behind, but I'm the president of the Student Animation League as well. Sorry.
There we go.
And it was an honor to collaborate and help out with you guys on this. These were some incredible students and animators. This is not working, for love of God. Okay. Yeah, sorry, my name is Bridget. I'm the president of the Student Animation League, and it was an honor to collaborate with the Gray on this, but my questions for our wonderful filmmakers. You mentioned that obviously this was your senior year thesis. How far out did you know that this was going to be the film you were going to make? Is something you pre-planned for, or did it just kind of come to you? Because typically you plan a little bit beforehand for your thesis, but when did you decide on this story?
So the question was, how far in advance did we preconceive this idea for our senior thesis in college? Okay. I mean, mine kind of started off with like one of my 50 journals that I have lying around that like I never finished because then I started another journal. But I have like a bunch of experimental animation ideas that are either performed practically or just something that's like I'll find like a trend on social media. I'm like, oh, it's cool. Maybe I'll like do a riff. This one I came up with, but you'll kind of see it visually in the short film. But the idea was this is just an idea that I wrote down. A character in the POV of the protagonist essentially sees a silhouette. We're not really sure what it is. It's just a scribbly silhouette. And then we cut to the mind close up, which is like the shot of the brain. And then you see the stop motion letters coming together. And then after those letters form, and based on the movement of the letters, you can kind of glean, I suppose, the protagonist emotional response to said word. It cuts back to the previous shot, but instead of a scrabbly silhouette, it's a rendered image of what the protagonist is looking at. So in the short film, you'll see like a character pull up something and it looks like they're smoking it. And then it cuts to the next shot, cigarettes forming. And then it cuts back and you see that it's a cigarette that's being lit. I just thought that was a good, like to me, it's like, oh, like that's kind of what it's like to like, whatchamacallit, like reground yourself. Like a common grounding technique that I would use was, whenever it would start like dissociating and, flying away mentally, I would just start by like mentally voicing out objects in the room, like sky, trees, cottonwood, sagebrush, as a way like, by describing physical elements of the real world, therefore like I am in the real world, like I am functioning as a real person. So that's kind of like the mechanic of that short film was originated from. So yeah.
Wait, that's actually really interesting because isn't there a grounding technique for like the 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you touch, yada yada?
Yeah.
I went to therapy, guys. The question was, how did you know?
When did you?
When did you know
Yeah,
the story?
How did you decide?
How did I decide? Honestly, first it came off with an assignment from school, storyboard a story and tell it to the class. But a lot of the process, even pre-production, was based a lot in my family. So my cousin wrote a good amount of the script. My sister voice acted in it. And then, of course, all of the interviewing and discussing with other family members. So I guess my kind of big decision to be like, oh, this was an assignment from class to, okay, let's make this my senior thesis. Let's do it. Probably was kind of solidifying that history with my family and then understanding, hey, this is something that I actually want to share with the world. I think it might be really helpful for me and for everyone else. So yeah, that was that. That was the process.
Thank you. Thank you. Finally.
Right.
Hi, I'm Bob Miller, and I'm here. I'm a friend of Joe's. I've seen his film several times, and it always blows me away. And in this context, it was even more so because of the other two films. And I sense that, or that part of what happens to someone who goes through something so horrible is that a piece of humanity, of your humanity, gets taken away or shut away in some regard. You're embarrassed about yourself. You're embarrassed to talk about it. You're embarrassed to think about it. And yet you take the courage to confront in yourself, in your own history and in your own unconscious, really, that horribleness, and in a way, take back your humanity by humanizing the event. And I'm thinking of some of the images which are so powerful. Joe's transition of the bag of coal to a balloon and floating away in it. And Grace, in your film, the images that I will stick with me forever is that poor uncle, his bloody hand in one frame, and then several frames later, the tears flying from his face. I sense that what you've done is you've found images that humanize the experience for yourself. And in so doing and presenting them to us, you've humanized some of the pain, some of the horror that we look at in the world for all of us. And what a wonderful thing to do, because there are so many horrors that we look at every day that we can't imagine how that bag of coal ever gets laid down. So anyway, thank you so very much. But I think the question of courage and persistence in trying to find exactly the images that are going to solve it for you and then presenting it to the rest of us is just wonderful. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody. I'm a filmmaker and I did puppet animation and films, but I also went to New York University, but also, but, okay. Oh, okay. I was saying I did puppet animation. I was at New York University and I worked with the animation department at my loft downtown during a period of where the Soviet Union was just, and Reagan had just been put in. So it was all confronting some similar issues. I really am happy to see these works. That's really beautiful that this kind of work's still coming out and that you're doing it. And I hope it gets out there in the world and gets seen a lot. I also worked with children in animation for the New York Council of the Arts for 13 years in the hospitals. So working with all different people. And so it's great, it's following on that theme and it's just getting it out. And I wanted a question. What is your next steps? What do you see as your future?
I'm gonna repeat the question also.
So the question was, what are the next steps for like us, like personally, or like for the films? Well, I guess the next step is to, at least for me, is to enter the film into the festival circuit. Although I've been holding back for the past 8 months just because like I have a lot of thoughts. Probably not enough time, too many thoughts. Where I'm at this point, especially now in therapy, where over the course of my college career, I've received many incredible marks on my assignments, and a lot of those marks were for projects or artworks that came from a negative place. And it's like, how do I get such a good score or like good credit or like good criticism and notes? And yet this came from a really crummy place. And it really begged the question of like, is my success as an artist determined by how much I suffered in life? And I think that, I mean, I guess now I'm walking the line of like the poor, starving, and suffering artist who's, living the Van Gogh adjacent life. But I don't really have, I'm not sure, a satisfying answer to your question, but that's the question that I'm currently asking myself. And I know that at some point I will be able to move on from that. And I know I will show the film to festivals, but I think it's like that kind of like that mental hiccup of like the first film that I push out into this public domain, it's such a big, also a personal film too, it's just, I'm sure putting a little bit more weight than what it actually is, but that's my comment on that.
Cool. As for me, Dog Tied to the Shed is currently in the festival circuit, so it's running around, going a few different places, and it'll probably be over soon. It'll probably be open to public very soon because I think I'm done with it. I'm sick of it. As for myself, animation industry's not doing so hot right now. Don't know if you know. So I don't want to say that I'm hopeless, but this project was not like me trying to step into the industry or whatnot. It was, like we were saying before, just an expression of, what happened. And so I'm still really glad that I got this project done. I'm glad that it's getting out into the world. I really am. But in terms of animation, I am re-exploring my kind of fine arts background. I'm doing a lot of painting, kind of getting myself back in shape, paintbrush wise. And I've been getting into theater work as well, which is a different form of art expression. I mean, all these different types of mediums can tell the stories that you need to. So definitely just staying creative is what's important, at least for me. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we've got one final question over here. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Aviva. I'm a first-year grad student at NYU Art Therapy Department, and I have a comment and a question. The comment is I've been trying to learn more about Taoism, and the first sentence of Tao Te Ching is the Tao you can tell is not the internal Tao, and the name you can say is not the internal name, and it's very similar to what we have been talking about, the limitation of language, and I think it's very relevant in terms of animation, because I think when we try to talk about an experience, it's not so like our feelings are always changing, but the language is not changing. So I don't think the way we talk about, we use word to describe our experience can always relate to we um, how we feel about that event at the moment. But I think art is a very spontaneous way to express how our feeling, how we feel about the event. And my question is, by dissecting those experiences piece by piece, do you feel like it helps, it increases your sense of agency toward the experience? Like, do you feel like you have more control? Do you feel like you have more autonomy for that experience? I don't know if I describe it clear enough.
For me, definitely, it helps me to own the experience. And actually, I did a film, a feature film called The Accident, which was sort of about the accident and the history of my family. And we reconstructed the film, and my friend Marty played my mother. And it was extraordinary because it was sort of funny because when we at first I wasn't going to be in it. I'm the youngest, very much the youngest of four. And I wasn't going to be in it. And I said, well, that's silly. Of course, I'm part of the family. And then a friend interviewed me, and everyone else in the family had been totally open. And I was a little squirrely as a journalist, you know? And so I thought, how could I get a forthright interview from me and like be off guard. And so we decided to restage the accident and ask me questions and during it. And so that's what we did. And believe me, I was off guard. And it worked very, very well. But in the end, all the imagery that I kept with me all my life and would, you know, especially when I was younger, which was just, you know, rewinding in my head all the time, I owned all of a sudden, and it was mine. And it was an amazing experience. There was a lot more to experience after that. Was when I was 50. I'm now 80. So it's you know, things take place over time. But you do, I think it does help you to own the experience. Do you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you've been saying. It helps to own your experiences. And you know, it's weird to think that you might gain agency over something that's already happened or that happened to someone else in a completely different generation, let alone. It is odd to be like, oh, I have control or more control over something terrible that happened. But in kind of facing it and kind of addressing that big scary monster, it is like taking one piece of coal out at a time, and you know, addressing it makes it more manageable, especially with the support of friends and whatnot. So absolutely, art is just one of many ways to take control over your experiences.
Thanks. I do agree with those previous responses with Mr. Lovett and Clove's response. Yes, I agree that like these experiences do allow me a sense of agency. I mean, more so with like the older you get, you know, the more knowledge, experience, etc. Although I think like perhaps because it's like recent times, but I feel like every year I'm always tested in terms of like acquiring this agency, in terms of like finding myself, not just getting a better sense of myself, but also like owning the lived experience of surviving something so traumatic. And I say that, and the reason why I say that is because I came out in 2016, and the following year was the first year of Donald Trump's presidency. This year is 2025, and it is now the second term of Donald Trump's presidency. I would like to believe I'm a very optimistic person, but in times where your own trauma is generalized and weaponized against such a very small community of individuals, while I say it's very easy to feel discouraged, I think I own it to not just my 15-year-old self, but also to current and future, young trans people, to speak up for them when right now they have little to no voice. Back then I had little to no voice, but now that I'm in, was given so much privilege to attend NYU and graduate and attend this panel and make a film. It's hard. It's really hard. But that's the only thing I can do, that we can do, is just to keep owning it. Just because what else is there? So that's what I have to say to that.
Leah, I was going to ask if it's okay if I can get permission to have Dr. Grosso close us out on some breaths as we opened.
Absolutely. Love breathing. Well, if you didn't know, I do a lot of this every day. So I would invite everyone just to find a comfortable seat. I know you've been sitting a while, so maybe you need to wiggle, maybe you need to stand. But grounding, as our lovely filmmaker said, there's so many ways to do it. So I'm thinking I'm gonna steal a little bit from what they said and lead us through a bit of a combo exercise, but get comfortable, feel your feet planted on the floor, sit up nice and tall, and at your own pace, inhale deeply through your nose. And when you feel ready, a nice deep exhale out of your mouth. And another breath. Maybe on this next breath, that exhale can be a little louder, releasing that stress and tension. And I invite you to find 5 things in this room that you can see. Maybe label them in your own mind, just naming it: chair, table, person. And a deep breath in. And an exhale out. Now, I invite you to identify 4 things that you can touch with your hands. Maybe it's yourself, a chair, something in your environment. And deep inhale in and exhale out. And now 3 things that you can hear. Maybe there's sounds close to you or through those doors. Naming those things to yourself. With a deep inhale in and an exhale out. And now 2 things that you can smell. Deep inhale in and exhale out. And the last thing is just bringing awareness to taste. Maybe you're lucky and have a coffee or tea, or maybe we can imagine what's going to be at the reception and visualize that. And a deep inhale in, and nice loud exhale out. And then my favorite thing, as I like to do with my littles, is do a little wiggle. Just shake it all out.
Much to everyone. And I'd like to invite you to a small reception that is going to be on the second floor of this building. All you need to do is go out this door back into the elevator lobby. There are stairs or there are elevators that will take you to the second floor, and it will be obvious where to go once you get there. So thank you so much for coming. I hope to see you upstairs. Let's continue the
you.
conversation.